Okay. Well, we're going to get started. I know that you have lots of other good things, to attend this afternoon, so I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you so much for joining us for one of two young alumni panels that we are hosting. My name is Rebecca Chernyha. I'm an Associate Director of Admissions here at Dickinson, and I also happen to be regionally based in Washington, D.C. So I am joined today by four fantastic alums. Just to give you all some context about how this panel is going to work, I will be having them introduce themselves, and then we're going to go through some guided questions on my end, and we do have some time saved at the very end to take your questions as well. So definitely start thinking of those now, and when you have them, you can put them in the Q&A chat. I am joined by a colleague today. She is dark on the screen, but she is my backup. She'll be the one who is helping me say all of those shared questions from the chat. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my alums. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves. And Amy, we're going to start with you.
Great. Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thanks for joining us. My name is Amy Cadwallader. I graduated in 2001, and apparently I still count as young alumni. While at Dickinson, I multiple majored in chemistry, biochemistry, and molecular biology. I was asked to mention a notable or a group that I was involved in, and for 3 years while at Dickinson, I was the student director of new student orientation. So it was always super exciting to get ready for all the new students to come. And currently, my role is that I am the Director of Science and Drug Policy at the American Medical Association. And that basically means that I am the scientific expertise for the AMA, and I provide guidance and advisement on legislation and policies and things that are going on from the scientific angle.
Excellent. Thank you. Natalie.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Cortez. I graduated in 2009, so was still glad to hear that I counted as young alumni as well. I majored in women and gender studies. I think it was that year that I graduated that it moved from women's studies to women and gender studies. So that was sort of a nice thing. I participated for 3 years in the Office of ODI. I don't know if that's still named ODI now, but Office of Diversity Initiatives. And currently, which I just had a flashback moment, sort of leading up to this. So I work for Apple and I'm a diversity business partner. So what that means is I help the organization think about how are we recruiting underrepresented talent into Apple, and how are we making sure that they have a really positive experience there. So thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
Absolutely. Thank you. Andrew.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Andrew Guy. I'm class of 2012, majored in economics during my time at Dickinson. And I was a tour guide on campus with the Liberty Cap Society. Also participated in an organization called the Clark Forum, which brings speakers to campus once or twice a week. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the panel. But I now work at a law firm in DC. I do mostly bid protest work, which involves disputes between government contractors when the government awards a contract and there's questions about whether the government chose the right party and checked the right boxes and considered the right things. I also do death penalty work pro bono during my time at the firm.
Excellent, thank you. And then Darrell.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here with you all today. My name is Darrell Pacheco. I graduated from Dickinson in 2012, and I was a political science major at Dickinson. An experience at Dickinson that always stands out to me was when I served as a residential advisor. I served as an RA my senior year, and I had a dorm of freshman men who were all athletes. So stories on stories, and it was a great time, and we got through it. Currently, I work as a fixed income trader at Vanguard. I trade municipal securities actively. So my team of about 15 people, we're responsible for about $200 billion, and I trade across the full spectrum of maturities.
Fantastic. Thank you all. So yeah, with that being said, we're just going to jump right into the questions. So we are going to go back. We're going to start with your time at Dickinson. So drawing back on those years, drawing back on those memories. I know for many students, they have an understanding about what their college experience will be. They might expect some things to be happening, but in your experience, what is a moment, either academic or personal, that you had at Dickinson that really surprised you or that you were not expecting to experience? And Amy, we'll start with you.
I think when I went to Dickinson, I always knew that I was going to be a scientist because I've been a scientist all my life. But I think what really surprised me was that I didn't have to just be a scientist. I could do anything that I wanted. And, my long list of extracurriculars shows that, and that I directed orientation for new students. So I got that aspect of it. And my life wasn't always spent in the lab or with a book somewhere. I had a really, really wonderful opportunity to learn photography and to, take religion courses on yoga and things like that, that a lot of scientist colleagues that I have now didn't have the opportunity to experience.
Wonderful. Natalie.
Awesome. Yeah. So I grew up, in New York City. I was a total city kid. Went to Dickinson with the Posse Foundation, which is a scholarship program for high achieving students. And so went to Dickinson with this scholarship and was put in the middle of Pennsylvania, had never been there before. And so I think from the moment that I stepped onto campus, everything was, a little bit of a culture shock, but also super rewarding. From all the different classes that I had to take, I had no idea what I wanted to major in. I didn't know what it was like to live in a dorm. I, had never even slept over a friend's house at that point. And so I think the Dickinson experience in totality is something that I don't know if I could choose one, because I think from the moment that I stepped on campus to every year that I kept coming back, it was a little bit of a different experience each time.
Wonderful. Andrew.
Yeah, so I think I did not anticipate what the Clark Forum was or the opportunities that would present. So I learned a couple months into my freshman year about this organization on campus that brought speakers once or twice a week, and got the opportunity to be a part of the Clark Forum starting in my sophomore year. And within a few weeks of starting, we had the first ever Secretary of Homeland Security and former governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Ridge, come to campus. And as part of that, not only was I involved in introducing him and getting the presentation ready, I also got to interview him when he arrived on campus and ask him about the creation of the department, the purpose of the department, and ask him other things. And as having that opportunity as a sophomore is something that I never would have expected coming in my first day at Dickinson. And I got that opportunity regularly every other week to interview different speakers and different professors and studying really fascinating things.
Excellent. And Darrell.
Yeah, one experience that stands out to me, academic actually, is when I had the ability to do an honors thesis in political science. I was one of those really ambitious students at Dickinson. I was the first in my family to go to college. And I was very, very ambitious. And I did my senior seminar my junior year, which freed up a lot of space in order for me to do an independent study, which turned into an honors thesis. So I worked one-on-one with a political science faculty member, and we dove deep into the private donation behavior of lobbyists, particularly those who traffic in DC circles. We were able to get an amazing data set, and I wrote this really lengthy research paper, defended it in front of the entire department, and was awarded honors when I graduated in my major. Not something I envisioned at all. I just happened to have an idea, and I had a professor who cared enough to pursue that itch with me, and we got a pretty substantial paper out of it. So that's something that always stands out.
I love this theme of exploration, either intended or unexpected. That's something that I definitely hear from lots of Dickinson, either students, current or past. I think that's a really cool thing to hear about in your experiences as well. Natalie, you kind of segued perfectly into my next question, because this is always a question that, as someone in admissions, I get asked about quite a bit. And this is about choosing a major. I know that can be a very high pressure situation. So I'm very curious to know, as I'm sure our attendees are, how did you decide on the major that you wanted to pursue? And Amy, back to you.
For me, as I noted, I knew I was always going to be a scientist, but when I got to campus, faculty are fantastic at having an open door and being there to talk to. So I literally walked around and talked to professors about what they did, what kind of research I could do, what scientific topics they talked about. And I chose a mentor and a major based on what I thought would be the coolest thing for me to do at the time. And I fell in love with chemistry and biochemistry and how things work in the body. And here we are now.
Excellent. Natalie.
Yeah, my journey is a little bit not as linear. So I went to an all girls school for high school. So I was like, no way am I doing anything related to women's studies. Like, I'm over this. Got to Dickinson and thought I was going to be a business major. Took some business courses and was like, nope, this is not it. Went on to biology. I don't know why I would, think that I would, took one class and was like, nope, not it either. And then I really fell in love with American studies and sort of the sociology, sort of the social studies side of the house. And then felt myself learning about, how women impact the economy, right? And how women sort of are embedded in every facet of life, and, how, whether, we're underrepresented in spaces and how that impacts policies and processes. And so really became invested in working with faculty on how do we fix this, right? How do we elevate and protect women? And so decided that I was going to major in women and gender studies.
Great. Andrew.
So I have a fairly boring answer to this question. I pretty much knew going in that I wanted to major in economics, and that worked out the whole way through. But I think one of the main reasons that worked out is because of the liberal arts education that Dickinson offers, and the fact that you're not stuck with just taking classes in your major. So I loved economics. I loved my economics courses. I thought they were fascinating, but I was able to take classes in other areas, take a philosophy course, take an African government and politics course, go and study abroad in the UK and take a class on theater and Shakespeare, and still be an economics major, which was a really great thing that Dickinson and the liberal arts education offers.
Right. Very good. Darrell.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. For me, it was a bit of an interesting journey. So I think I mentioned a few moments ago in some prior remarks, I was first in my family to go to college. So I grew up reading Forbes magazine. And if you take a look at Forbes magazine, where it ranks richest people in the world, and that wasn't the piece that so much attracted me. What attracted me was when you actually go down the list of what they all studied, it's business, economics, political science largely. So I said, hey, there's something here. There's some kind of a correlation, and just tucked it away in the back of my mind. And as I went through my undergrad experience, I was very, very fascinated by the interplay and interaction between politics and business, and how politicians become businessmen and businessmen want to be politicians, and that may or may not work out in the long term. But I decided when I got to college that political science was enough breadth. It gave me enough breadth where I can really do a full sampling of the intellectual spectrum that suited my interests. So I took several courses in economics, I took several courses in business, took several courses in political science. I went into languages even, and looked for crossover efforts there. So for me, it was very much a combination of, hey, I've seen this work in the real live world where people have gotten this education, have gone on to be successful, and that unique combination of, hey, I'm actually deeply personally interested in what I'm reading and studying, and political science came forth as the choice.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's great. I love this combination of stories, either linear paths or non-linear paths, but either way, like, you found your path through Dickinson, which is wonderful. So I know also, kind of thinking about the college experience and, kind of going back to those expectations, I think, that students have. I'm curious to know if you had an influential Dickinson mentor. So a mentor, either maybe a traditional sense or a non-traditional sense, but just someone that you really felt provided insight and guidance to you during, your very formative college years. So Amy, back to you.
I found this to be the hardest question on the list because there are several very, very important people to me that came through Dickinson and mentored me. But I think I'm going to shout out Joyce Bylander, who when I was there and she started in student life and residential life and eventually became a dean and then a provost, and now she's retired, I hope living an amazing life somewhere. But through that whole process, she connected with so many students on a personal level, and I was one of them. And when exciting things or terrible things happened, you could walk into this dean's office, and talk to her, and she would hug you and make you feel better immediately. And even after I graduated, and at times now, there's still communication there, and she's still providing that insight and that, I almost want to say, motherly love. And she is just a very special person and will always be.
That's beautiful. Natalie.
Yeah, so Amy, you took my person, so I'll give you another two. So like just to echo Amy's point, so we actually called her Mama B. And she was, I mentioned earlier that I was able to get to Dickinson through the Posse Foundation. And she's the one who really brought that to campus. I know the Posse Foundation has since left, but we met, even though we were assigned a mentor that we met weekly with, her door was always open. And I talked to her about, how crazy my home life was, to, what, my goals and dreams and like crazy ideas that I had about how to make this world a better place for people. And so that was something that I look back now and think about how much of a tremendous value that was to my life. The other person I want to mention who's still there is Jerry Philogene. So she was just an incredible professor who really challenged me to stretch, to, even when I thought I was right, to really value other people's opinions and perspectives. It really pushed my writing to the next level, where, really helped in office hours where I felt underprepared, to make sure that I was getting that extra preparation, to make sure that I felt good enough. And always just went the extra mile. And I feel like that's a testament to a lot of faculty at Dickinson. But those are the two that stand out to me.
Yeah, wonderful. Andrew.
So the person that came to mind looking at this question was Professor Pullman, who, when I was at Dickinson, taught a constitutional law class that had about 10 students in it. It was taught in a style where we all sat at a giant table and discussed each of the cases, which was a really great way to learn a pretty complex area. But one of the big things we did in that class was every month or so, we'd have a writing assignment where we had to distill a bunch of complicated arguments and thoughts in 5 to 6 pages. So I would start out with an initial draft of about 15, 20 pages and have to figure out how to shorten that and put everything in active voice. It was difficult, but I really, really am thankful for that class, and particularly the seminar style that class was in, that it really taught me how to write succinctly, how to really get to the point, which I think has really served me well over the last few years, where I write constantly.
Absolutely. And Darrell.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to distill down into one person. The first name that comes to mind is a gentleman by the name of Dr. Norm Jones, who's no longer with the college. He is currently the Chief Diversity Officer at Amherst College. He and I still have a deep and enduring relationship and keep in touch very regularly. When I was at Dickinson, I was very much looking for a mentor and a role model. I felt as though I needed to see some of those profiles in action. And Norm presented that ably. He took me into his home, got to meet his wife. At the time, he was completing a PhD, so I got some entree into that world. And he really took me under his wing and helped develop me. I mean, that was incredible. On the academic side, too many to name, but one that stands out is a professor by the name of Toby Reiner, who's in the political science faculty. He and I still keep in touch to this day. We text, we talk. We just had a Zoom session a few weeks ago. And whenever he comes to Philadelphia, I like to host him for coffee or drinks or a meal. And these connections are real. These connections are lifelong. For him, he helped me become a much better writer. Dickinson's an academically challenging school. You should all know that. But he helped me really up my game, and he was a hearty contributor to my honors thesis as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm delighted, but I should say I'm not surprised that you all had a challenging time to just pick one mentor, one person of influence, that you really had multiple individuals to choose from. And I think that truly is very strongly reflected in the Dickinson experience, is just how personalized it is. And I think, again, that's very evidenced by your answers. So we're still sticking with your college years. So thinking back on your experiential learning, so that might be a service learning trip, study abroad, internship, externship, research, kind of anything related to that, outside the textbook classroom work. Did any experiences that you had during your time at Dickinson influence your career at all, or you find yourself drawing from on now? And Amy, starting with you again.
Without question, starting after my freshman year that summer, my mentor asked me to stay at Dickinson during the summer and do scientific research in the lab. And this is cool, I would do that. And starting that summer after my freshman year until I graduated, I continued to do independent research with him and another biochemistry professor. And I left undergraduate college being published in peer-reviewed scientific journals. And I didn't grasp at the time what that really meant. So then I went to graduate school, and I was in classes with these people who had never been in a lab before. They were all scientists also, but they had never been in a lab. They had never touched scientific equipment. And here I was, an already published scientist. And without question, that springboarded me to help me be successful later on in life, because I was already head and shoulders above a lot of people in graduate school in the lab and knowing how to do things. And just that experience of writing scientifically and publishing was invaluable. And again, I did not fully understand that until I was well into graduate school, what the value of that was.
Very interesting. Natalie.
Yeah, so I got to travel the world with the Dickinson. I mean, I know study abroad is sort of built into sort of the character of who Dickinson is, but I got to go to spend time in study abroad in Cameroon and work for a microfinance company that lent loans out to women who were trying to start small businesses. I got to go to Jamaica and spend some time there working on a cooperative. I got to go to Venezuela on a service learning trip for a month, and where I worked on an organic farm, and I helped the women create a cooperative where they made and sold jam. So, at the time, I didn't know that this was all like preparation for what I would be doing, right? I didn't know that my passion for inclusion would be a job that somebody would pay me for. Looking back, totally, like, all these experiences prepared me definitely for my current career. But I think I just want to say it again, like, I got to travel the world. The first time I got on a plane, I'm a first generation kid too, who came from Harlem in New York City, who, was like, sure, I'll go to college. Like, they gave me a scholarship. I'm going to go to this one, right? Didn't really know much about Dickinson. Got there, and then, like, just completely turned my world upside down in the most remarkable and influential way ever and possible. If you're worried about, like, paying to go abroad, like, Joyce Bylander and other folks, like, they figured it out and made sure that I got to have the experiences that they thought were valuable in preparing me for what was next. And so really encourage you if you're thinking about, right, you're obviously thinking about Dickinson, like take advantage of the study abroad. I got to travel for like a year and a half of my undergrad career, which is like unheard of in other places. And got to graduate on time, right, counted for credit. And yeah, so those like real life learning experiences are something that I to this day talk about.
That's fantastic. Andrew.
Yes, so I got the opportunity while at Dickinson to work at a U.S. representative's office, actually in Carlisle. So I was able to stay on campus, do some work, but um, also do that. And while it was a really rewarding experience, it was really great to do that. It definitely made me realize that I did not want to go into politics. I thought when I first arrived on campus, maybe I want to go into politics eventually, or maybe I want to pursue a legal career. And after doing that and also taking some law-related courses at Dickinson, I realized I wanted to pursue a legal career, so it was helpful in that way to sort of narrow down what I was thinking about doing long-term.
Yeah, excellent. Darrell.
Yeah, at Dickinson, I had the ability to participate in several internships. And I interned at a regional bank called KNBT, which recently got bought out by BB&T. And while I was at the bank, I was able to experience a couple different parts of the banking industry and got really interested in investment management. There were actually some Dickinson alums who worked at the bank, and they take me out to coffees and lunches and entertain my questions. And it was from them that I caught wind of the firm that I'm presently at called Vanguard. Went back to the Dickinson career office, come to find out we had plenty of alums at the firm. And the career office assisted me with putting together a few introductory phone calls. So after about 4 or 5 introductory calls, I was able to apply and get into the applicant pool, and then grad my way through the interview and landed a role prior to graduation. And I've been here ever since. I've been progressively promoted up through the ranks, and I turn back and I give back a lot of my time and attention back to the college. And every year I band together a group of Dickinson alums who are at the firm, and we host the Dickinson Visit Day, where we bring students live directly onto campus for a full day of programming, and then we hand walk those resumes to HR. So we really try as best as we can to give back. But I'd say that's one experience that has really helped me in my career. And then all the professors along the way who gave me advice. Professor Doug Edlin, again, who unfortunately is no longer with the college. Doug Edlin spent a lot of time with me thinking through what a financial services career could look like, and how my political science skills, reading, writing, being able to synthesize my opinion, being concise in my speech would help. And I'm better off for those experiences.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so I think actually this was a great pivoting question, because actually a lot of your answers kind of alluded to it. It's sort of your professional life now. I know, so not only is that major question looming, what am I going to study in college, but just even kind of then how is this going to translate into life after college? What sort of employment am I looking at? So I'm very curious to know, when you were an undergraduate student, did you know that your position or line of work existed? And if not, how did you learn about it? Or if yes, how did you know that was what you wanted to pursue? So Amy, starting with you again.
I had no idea. I didn't even know what I wanted to do after I graduated from Dickinson. So I just kept going to graduate school. I have a master's degree in biology and forensic science. And then I got my PhD in pharmacology and analytical toxicology. Not really grasping what it is that I wanted to do or what I could do. And I think what springboarded me to where I am now is that I got mad. I got mad at the lack of science in politics and how people didn't look at evidence and what was true, and it let that influence what happens in our world. So I too got an opportunity to travel the world. I worked for the World Anti-Doping Agency and lived in Italy for several years. And that really showed me a lot about how science can influence way of life. So when I came back to the States, I really sought out some kind of position where I could advise and be a science advisor of some sort, and fell into the policy world. And now I can honestly say that I am making a difference. I am putting that evidentiary perspective on policies that are going through Congress and that are working their way through the country. And I think that it was my Dickinson education that allowed me to find all of that, because I didn't have to just be that person in the laboratory that people think of when they think of a scientist. And I think that I learned that at Dickinson because I didn't have to be that there.
Very good. Natalie.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I had no idea. I knew that I had a set of personal experiences, right? I'm Latina, I'm Puerto Rican. I grew up, right, and I experienced the world in a way that I knew, you know, wasn't always equal to others, and I didn't always have the same access to opportunity as others. And so I knew I had that like in one shelf, right? And then I was like taking classes and really learning about how, again, the impact of women on the economy, on in politics, on infrastructure, on like all of like in every facet imaginable, right, that makes up society and the way in capitalism. And so I knew that I wanted to play some role in making sure that these systems and processes, were built on equity, right? And so I didn't know what that meant. I worked at ODI, the Office of Diversity Initiatives, and we would put on a bunch of programming, and we would roundtables, and we would talk to students about how they were experiencing their lives at Dickinson and what that meant and how that translated and how they felt. And, we would have conversations on gender and race. And I was very active involved at Dickinson and, being an activist, right? My friends joke about all of my best friends now are from Dickinson, and they always joke about, oh, here comes Natalie, the activist, because I would pick it outside the CAF, and like everybody respected that. And so when I graduated in 2009, unfortunately, the economy was not the best. So I had a job at Lehman Brothers, which, if we probably don't know, but anyway, bank went under. And so then that left me like, what am I going to do? I need a job. So I ended up taking a job at Columbia University. And so where I ended up staying for quite a bit of time. And then I moved to a nonprofit, and then I moved to an asset management firm. And now I work for a tech company, doing similar work, but working across industries, which has been, I think my experience at Dickinson, taking classes in all of these fields has definitely prepared me as an expert, to be an expert in my field, but to do it in any industry. And, now I think, think about the world, we think about this moment in time where we're really leaning in and having conversations about equality and access and race. And I get to do that at a job that pays me to do that. And that sounds, it still feels strange because I feel like this is the work that we all should be doing. But they pay me to do it, and it's amazing. And I can't imagine, my personal is political. If you take any women studies classes at Dickinson, you'll hear that all the time. And that's definitely true in my professional life. So.
Awesome. Andrew.
Yeah, so I had a good sense, particularly by about my junior year, that I wanted to go to law school, but no one in my family had ever gone to law school, was a lawyer. So my understanding of that process was very minimal. I had a sense that I wanted to be in DC. So my thought was, well, I'm going to go to a law school in DC or around DC, and that's it. But I was sitting during office hours with one of my professors, Professor Edlin, kind of talking about my options. And he said, well, what about the University of Michigan? That seems like a really good fit for you. I think you'd really like it there. And I was like, okay, that seems completely random. So not knowing much, I went out to Ann Arbor, Michigan for Admitted Students Weekend and just completely fell in love with the school. I remember the first day there, not to plug Michigan Law School, but there was a statement about Michigan students take the law seriously, but they don't take themselves seriously, which I think really encapsulated what I was looking for in a law school. And for a professor at Dickinson to kind of not only know the intangible qualities of law schools, but also know me well enough to know what would be a good fit, even if geographically it may not have made sense, I think really kind of speaks to kind of Dickinson professors and what the Dickinson experience is like.
Absolutely. And Darrell.
Yeah, I solidified my interest in investment management coming out of those internships that I had mentioned at the bank. I think for me, I've always followed my intellectual curiosities, and I've always been deeply fascinated by the capital markets, not only for the prospects of growing wealth, but the understanding of how money moves through the world, how money is created and moves through the world. I think that is far richer and deeper of a conversation in the capital markets, and the nuance that I think is lost in much of the current discourse about the financial services sector. So given that, my academic kind of intrigue about it, and the ability to do some of the math, and I quite enjoy being around others and working with others, led me right to this industry. And it's been a wild ride, and it's been a lot of fun. So I knew very early on what I wanted to do, but I'd say my Dickinson education has helped me set myself apart from my colleagues head over foot. One instructive example of that is very early in my career, I was asked by a senior manager to revise a notice that was going to go out to the entire division. I think I was at the firm for about 3 years at that point, right? So this person came 3 levels down because I'd made a bit of a name for myself with writing and research. And that's all from Dickinson. It's all from Dickinson. So I like to say that this education prepared me well.
Yeah. I think what's so interesting is in a way, you're all in different fields, you're all in different industries, but so much of the work that you do is interdisciplinary. So at the risk of answering my own question that I'm about to ask you next, I think having that interdisciplinary college experience translates very well for really the interdisciplinary function of the jobs that we see today. So yes, like I said, I was about to answer my own question, but I am curious to know kind of from your perspective, how would you say that Dickinson and a liberal arts education prepared you for your professional life? Amy.
Well, Rebecca, I do think that you answered it well, and so did Darrell with what he said. I think that the liberal arts education really made me a well-rounded person who sees things interdisciplinary, and really my time at Dickinson taught me how things are so very intertwined. And while I am a scientist, that doesn't define me, because I work in the political science world. I work in the diversity world, and all of the worlds that we're all talking about. I think that they are all intertwined in some point. And it was Dickinson that really showed me that, and showed me the value of that interdisciplinary nature of how things in the real world work. And I truly do think that perspective and that knowledge put me head and shoulders above, peers where I was in school, because they had come from larger universities, and all they had studied for 4 years was science and being in a lab, and didn't really grasp how everything fit together in the bigger context of the world. So, I sounding like a broken record, I think that is very true, and it is why I am where I am.
Wonderful. Natalie.
Yeah, so at one of my previous companies, the CEO was always talked about liberal arts majors, and he tasked one of our teams to figure out how do we get more of them, right? And this was an investment management environment, right? Where, a lot of the students came from big institutions that all they studied were like business and management and investment banking and other related. And it was because he saw the value in how prepared people that came from liberal arts backgrounds were in the professional environment, how well-rounded, how critical thinking, how we applied critical thinking and added value in a capacity that I think others that, to Amy's point, that had only been in a lab or only been, in particular classes, weren't quite frankly trained to do, right? How we were at Dickinson, I was, taught to embrace my personal experiences and really channel that and think about how does this impact whatever you're studying, right? Or whatever problem you're trying to solve. And so I think the world is shifting, right? There's a demand for it. I can tell you professionally that is true. here I was helping this, CEO try to figure out, how do I get more people like you, right? That have these vastly different experiences, that take all these courses that seem unrelated, but that are adding tremendous value to how the world is shifting and moving. And so, that's Dickinson did that. And so, I can't underscore that enough.
Excellent. Andrew.
Yeah, so I think it is impossible to work in law without having a little bit of an understanding about a little bit of everything, or at least knowing who to ask or what questions to ask. The science will come up, history always comes up, math comes up. There's always questions with every new client, a new set of facts, a new business to understand, always something new. And I think the liberal arts education at Dickinson prepared me for that as best it could. I certainly sometimes still struggle with things, but I don't think I could have been more prepared than I was with a Dickinson education.
Great. And Darrell.
Yeah, I mean, my colleagues, fellow alum have stated it expertly. I guess the one thing I would add is I would just really lay on a little bit heavy. It's like the world has changed. The world has absolutely changed. And employers writ large are expecting much more from folks. They're expecting you to come in with a little bit of the flair to learn, right? And that was even an interview question for the current role that I have. When I was interviewing, I went through like 6 rounds of interviews, a very tough team. Can you articulate to us your learning style? How do you make decisions with imprecise or imperfect information? How do you extract valuable information from counterparties without revealing your hand? I mean, these are all literal, actual interview questions that I had to articulate and get through and convince them that I can do this, and I think I'm doing it well. So, I'll just lay on heavy with it, for you all on the phone, you all over Zoom, prospective students, really be thinking hard about that. I mean, really be thinking about how you can bone up on a full breadth of skills, and the Dickinson education is a great way to do that.
Excellent. Okay, so just being mindful of time, I do want to pivot to questions from the Q&A. So for those of you that have asked questions, thank you so much. If you are sitting on a question right now, please feel free to put that into the Q&A box. So the question that I do want to start with that did come through the Q&A, and I think it's certainly a very good one. So I'm sure when you were all looking at schools, you had many choices to choose from. So one of our attendees is curious to know, how did you know that Dickinson was the place for you, or how did you pick Dickinson in the end? So I would like to hear from everyone about this, so I will stick with our order. So Amy, coming back to you.
Completely accidentally. I was on the standard go visit colleges around regions trip with my parents, and actually we were in upstate New York looking at a school that I had myself convinced that is where I was going to be and where I fit in perfectly. And on the way home, we were driving on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and my mother said, "Oh, Carlisle, I think that there's a school there. We should go check it out." And me, being the snotty teenager that I was, sat in the back seat and complained and said, "We have seen 12 schools in 3 days. Let's just go home." Long story short, we went to campus. I stood in front of the admissions house and looked at Old West, and at that moment I knew that this is where I needed to be and where I wanted to go to school. And it's an honest to God true story, and it sounds made up, but my tour that day was amazing, seeing the campus, feeling, I don't know, something intangible about being there, and the people that I interacted with and met with. It was just something that I knew I had to be there, and then I was. Thank God they accepted me.
And Natalie, how about you?
Yeah, so I didn't visit Dickinson prior to deciding I was going there. So my story is a little bit different. I'm first generation. My parents did not go to college, and unfortunately we didn't have the means to sort of do a school tour or visit a bunch of schools prior to making a decision. I was nominated for a Posse scholarship through the Posse Foundation. They gave me a list of schools. I did some desktop research. I saw that Dickinson had study abroad, and I was like, oh, I want to, see the world. At that time, I thought I'd be sitting on a beach in Greece or something. And so I picked it. And then I went through, a 3-round rigorous selection process with the admissions team and the Posse Foundation, and got the scholarship. And at that point, it didn't occur to, like I didn't really grasp that I was like going to Dickinson. It was just a school. And then I got there, and then I really, realized like, wow, like the stars aligned for this to happen. And so I encourage you not to do what I did, right? Make sure that you research all of the schools in advance. But I think, a testament to sort of Amy's story as well is, you can't go wrong if you accidentally end up here. This is like a very, like a tremendous place to be.
Wonderful. Andrew.
Yeah, I think there is like a broader, I think, lesson here of like, I know this is a very stressful time in terms of looking through schools. You're going to end up where you're supposed to end up. Hopefully it's Dickinson, but I just would put that in there, that like looking back and thinking through my thought process back in the day, there's definitely questions as to why was I thinking that, or why was I doing that? But you end up, I think, at the right place. And for me, that definitely was Dickinson. Yeah. I think that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, great. And Darrell.
Yeah. If we're thinking about the selection process, I wanted a small school. I think, sometimes you have to know where you fit in. You have to know your strengths, know your weaknesses. If there's any kind of life advice I can share with all of you, and my parents had children very spread out. So I have a 17-year-old sister who's on the college search process now, and Dickinson's high on her list. But the one thing I'd say is you have to know yourself a little bit. And I wanted a small school. I wanted that focus. I wanted a bit of handholding. I needed that for my own development. And Dickinson checked many of the boxes, and I quite enjoyed rural Carlisle. So good times.
Excellent. So Andrew, actually a question came out specifically for you. You were called out by name. So I think a lot of your answers definitely did touch on this, but just sort of how did Dickinson prepare you for a career in law and, transitioning from undergrad to law school, just sort of what was that experience like? So I don't know if there's anything extra that you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing was learning how to write well. And I think I spoke of that a little bit before, but that really was a skill that I think I learned at Dickinson and not necessarily at law school. And I think that's really been something that's really helped throughout the past few years.
Excellent. So another question came through, kind of still staying in that similar vein. So I know some of you did attend graduate or professional school. So I think, for many of our students, that is something that they're even already thinking about in life after college. So how would you say that Dickinson prepared you specifically for grad school, or any exams that you had to take? Were you feeling confident when you were going through that process and experience?
I'll start and say, without question, I think I alluded to this in a lot of what I already said, is that, I was very well prepared for any graduate school entrance exams I had to take because of all of the different courses I had to take at Dickinson. I knew math, I could read, I could write, I could comprehend those things that are required on some of the GRE exams. But then when I got to school, I was so much more ahead of a lot of my peers because of the opportunities I had at Dickinson that it was almost like too easy. That I don't know, that sounds weird, but it was a smoother process than I had anticipated, or I think I was prepared for, that because of Dickinson.
Yeah. Excellent, thank you. So I do want to close out kind of with my favorite question. Again, just be mindful of everyone's time. And I know we got some panels coming right after this one. So I'm just curious to hear from all panelists, just what is one bit of advice that you have for first year students when they arrive at Dickinson? So Amy, I know you just answered, but you're back.
If it interests you, do it, try it, check it out, because you can at Dickinson. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself. So if you're curious about it, try it.
Great advice. Natalie.
Yes, that was going to be mine. Do and everything, figure out. I found my major by sort of like trial and error. I was like, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this, and see if it sticks. And so really encourage you to do that. I think there can be a lot of pressure, in your first year, particularly because there's, around social settings and fitting in. I think one thing that I really enjoyed about Dickinson is that everyone talked to everyone. And so I really encourage you to do that, right? Because, I think we gravitate towards the people who we live with, right? Who's like in terms of proximity. But those may not end up not being your friend, like your closest friends down the line. And so there were people that I met my senior year that I was like, man, I wish we like would have gotten all this time together our first year. So really encourage you to talk to people that look different than you. Talk to, people that you might not think that you have anything in common with, and try everything. Even those bouncy houses that are like on the campus quad that you're like, I'm too cool for school. I'm not gonna like do this. Just do it. It's fun.
Definitely agree. Andrew.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. Be ready to learn from your peers. The learning experience at Dickinson is not just in the classroom. It's not just from professors. It's really from getting to meet people who come from different backgrounds, have different perspectives, have different interests than you. I've made so many great friends at Dickinson that I still keep in touch with, who are now doing completely different things from me. And it really is just a huge blessing that I think that Dickinson provides. And I think that's the key thing, is just be ready to listen and learn.
Very good advice. Darrell.
Yeah. So I'd say, Dickinson's a time to really spread your wings a little bit. I know that sounds, that sounds so cliche, and I'm trying to find the better words to describe it. But it'll be a crying shame if you enter Dickinson and left Dickinson hanging around people who looked, thought, acted just like you, or from the same geographic area as you, or similar boarding school background or public school background, or whatever your background is. I think what really enriched my Dickinson experience, I got to meet people across the spectrum, across the socioeconomic spectrum, across the educational spectrum, who went everything from public school to boarding school. I got the most enrichment from my experience whenever I was with a different mix of people. And I know it's very easy to fall in with what's comfortable. You're far from home. You're still figuring yourself out. So some relatability and commonalities go a long way. Trust me, I get it. But always be sure, and maybe this is a helpful hint whether you attend Dickinson or elsewhere, but I hope it's Dickinson, be very mindful when we're post-COVID, hopefully. Be very mindful of your lunch group and your dinner group, right? If you're sitting with the same people over and over, great, you're building deep inroads, but make sure you're switching that up periodically. Getting to know folks across the aisle. So, during my time at Dickinson, I hung out with the law school nerds, I hung out with the finance nerds, I hung out with the activist folks, I hung out with people who did stuff at the Dickinson farm. And those experiences and perspectives and social circles were tremendously helpful, because, surprise, surprise, when you get into the working world, guess what? You're working with a variety of people from a variety of backgrounds, a variety of socioeconomic, upbringings, and different aspirations and different experiences. One thing I got the chance to do was be a manager. I managed a team of about 9 people for 2 years. And my team was all across the spectrum, men, women, all different races, all different educational backgrounds. Some were intense, some were easygoing, but I had to somehow manage this team to success, get to connect with them individually and drive us to our overall outcomes, which we did. But had I not had, the openness to really push myself and get out of my comfort zone at Dickinson, I don't know if I would have been as prepared to lead, such a heterogeneous team. So again, you all really need to be thinking about, hey, if I'm hanging around with the same folks and doing the same things, you're doing it wrong.
That is all fantastic advice, and I absolutely couldn't agree more. And I think it's a wonderful note to end this panel on. So, I just must say thank you all so much for giving a part of your Saturday to join us today. I know that I had an excellent time hearing about your paths, about your stories, and sort of what you're up to these days. So I'm sure it was helpful for our attendees as well. So thank you all so much for joining us, and for our attendees, I hope you enjoy the rest of the virtual fall open house. Thank you so much for being here. Take care.